My name is Marin Calder. I'm 36 years old. And the morning I walked into the Buncombe County Courthouse, my mother-in-law, Lorraine, was already seated, already smiling, already certain. She sat on the far side of the aisle in a charcoal dress with a brooch shaped like a dogwood blossom, her lawyer beside her in a suit that cost more than my husband's truck. My sister-in-law, Sloane, sat behind them with her ankles crossed and her chin tipped up, watching the door like she was waiting for a performance she'd already bought tickets to. And Wade, my husband's older brother, the executor, the man with the firm handshake. Wade stood near the window with his hands in his pockets, rocking on his heels like a man who already owned the room. I carried one thing: a flat black document case. Inside, it were 6 months of work exemplars, lab notes, an ink report, a notarial record I'd pulled from the Secretary of State, and one folded sheet of paper that none of them knew existed. They thought I'd come to grieve. They thought I'd come to beg. What none of them understood, not Lorraine, not Sloane, not Wade, not the lawyer in the good suit, was that I do this for a living. I am a forensic document examiner. I have spent 14 years proving, under oath, whether a signature is real or a lie. They had forged my dead husband's name and filed it with a court of law. They had handed a forgery to the one woman in North Carolina trained to take it apart. Welcome back to Suspense Com Stories. This is where family drama meets the quiet kind of justice, the kind that doesn't shout, doesn't slam doors, just shows up prepared and lets the truth do the talking. If you've ever been underestimated by people who decided you didn't count, this story is going to feel personal. If you're with me, comment the word prepared below and subscribe so you never miss the moment the underestimated one wins. Let me go back to the beginning. Ellie and I bought the home place the autumn we got married. Except we didn't really buy it. Ellie inherited the land from his grandfather, 8 acres of Blue Ridge hillside outside Weaverville, North Carolina, with a creek at the bottom, and a stand of poplar his granddad had refused to log his whole life. The house was nothing fancy. White clapboard, a tin roof that sang when it rained, a porch that leaned half a degree off level because the mountain underneath, it had its own opinions. Out back stood the thing Ellie loved most in the world after me, his workshop. A timber frame building he'd raised himself, beam by beam, with a sign over the door he'd routed by hand, Calder and Son. There was no son. There was just Ellie, finishing his grandfather's sentence. Ellie built staircases, custom millwork built-ins, the kind of curved handrail that takes a man 3 weeks and 100 years of inherited patience to get right. He was up at 5:30 every morning, sawdust in the cuffs of his jeans, a carpenter's pencil behind his ear, and a brass-edged level that had belonged to his granddad sitting on the workbench like a small religion. He had a saying for everything. The one he used most was 3 words: plumb, level, and true. He'd say it about a staircase. He'd say it about people. You can fake a lot of things, Mar, he told me once, sighting down that level with one eye closed. You can't fake plumb. Gravity always tells on you. And me, I'm a forensic document examiner, board certified. I run a small lab in Asheville called Blue Ridge Document Services, 2 rooms and a comparison microscope, and a video spectral comparator that cost more than the house. Banks hire me when a signature on a $250,000 check looks wrong. Insurers hire me when a claim form smells off. The State Bureau of Investigation has put me on the stand more times than I can count, and the defense lawyers have tried every which way to rattle me, and they have learned that you cannot argue a woman out of what a microscope can see. I authenticate handwriting. I detect alterations. I date inks. I read the ghost of one page pressed into the page beneath it. I prove, for a living, the difference between a real signature and a traced one. Ellie used to tease me about it. I build the thing, he'd say, and you prove it was really me who signed for the lumber. We were two people who'd spent our whole lives obsessed with the same thing from opposite ends. He made true things. I caught the false ones. We thought that was just a joke we shared. It turned out to be the reason I'm here to tell you this. Ellie's family lived close. His mother, Lorraine, was 20 minutes down the valley in a brick rancher she'd kept immaculate for 40 years. His brother Wade ran a grading and excavation outfit out toward Leicester Calder Site Works. Big yellow machines, bigger debts, though I didn't know that part yet. His sister Sloane was over in Hendersonville, married to a man who sold boats, and remarried to the idea that she'd been cheated by life out of something she was owed. They were polite to me. Polite the way the front desk at a nice hotel is polite, warm on the surface, and the warmth ends the second you're not useful. At Thanksgiving, Lorraine would compliment my casserole and then tell a story about Ellie's first wife, who'd been such a part of this family, as if to remind the table that I was the second draft. Wade borrowed money from Ellie twice that I knew of. He paid back neither cent. Sloane once asked me, at a Christmas, what a handwriting lady actually earned, and when I told her, she made a small sound and changed the subject, and I watched something do arithmetic behind her eyes. I told myself it was nothing. Every family has a temperature. I figured I just ran a degree colder with theirs. Ellie died on a Thursday in March. He delivered a built-in bookcase to a client up in Mars Hill and was driving home down the mountain on Route 19 when a man in a dual-cab truck, 3 times the legal limit at 4 in the afternoon, crossed the center line on a curve Ellie had driven 1,000 times. They told me he was gone before the first deputy reached the guardrail. I drove up there anyway. I sat in a county hospital hallway that smelled like bleach and burnt coffee. And a nurse put Ellie's wedding ring and his grandfather's pocket knife into a paper envelope and folded my hand around it. And I held that envelope like it was the only solid object left on earth. Here is what grief actually does, in case nobody's told you the truth of it. It doesn't knock you down. It removes the floor. You keep standing in the exact spot you were standing, and there's just nothing under you anymore, and you have to keep moving your feet like the floor is still there. Because if you stop, you'll understand it isn't, and that understanding will kill you. So I kept my feet moving. I called the funeral home. I called the man whose bookcase was still warm from Ellie's hands. I picked a casket. I chose the music. Ellie would have wanted Townes Van Zandt, and I gave it to him. I notified his clients. I made it a list, because a list was a floor I could build one board at a time. Lorraine came to the house that night and sat at my kitchen table and wept, and I held her hand, because whatever else she had just lost a son, and that grief was real. She had raised those 3 kids mostly alone after her husband drank himself out the door, raised them on a school cafeteria manager's wages, and she had loved Ellie. I never once doubted that she loved Ellie. What I came to doubt later was what she believed that love entitled her to take. The funeral was on a Saturday. Dogwood's just starting. the way they do in those hills in late March. And I remember thinking Ellie would have hated that he missed them. I organized all of it, because organizing the unbearable into a sequence of manageable tasks is the only thing I know how to do. When the minister asked the family to speak, Lorraine rose first and talked for 11 minutes. She talked about the double shifts, the cafeteria, the cleats she couldn't afford for Wade and bought anyway, the man Ellie had become. It was a beautiful eulogy. She did not say my name. Not once. Not his wife, not Marin, not 7 years of marriage and a workshop we'd wired together by flashlight. I told myself grief narrows your vision. I told myself a lot of things that spring. After the service, by the coat rack, Sloane touched my arm. Her perfume arrived a second before she did. "You should let Wade handle Ellie's affairs for now," she said, soft as a greeting card. "You've got enough on your plate. You're not yourself." I looked at her. Sloane had never once handled her own affairs. "I'll manage," I said. She pressed her lips together the way people do when they've rehearsed a second line and decide to hold it back for later. And Wade shook my hand at the graveside, squeezed it a beat too long, and didn't quite meet my eyes. "We'll take care of you, Marin," he said. "Your family." On the drive home, I replayed all three. Lorraine's silence where my name should have been. Sloane's casual little knife. Wade's promise that landed like a threat. And underneath the grief, I felt something else surface, thin and cold and specific, the feeling I get in my lab when a document looks fine to everyone in the room, and I'm the only one who can already see that it's lying. 2 weeks after the funeral, Lorraine started coming by to help me sort Ellie's things. At first, it was real help. She folded his flannels, boxed his boots, wrapped his grandfather's chisels in newspaper like they were china. Then I noticed the pattern. She wasn't sorting. She was searching. She opened the flat file in the workshop where Ellie kept his drawings and went through it twice. She worked the drawers of his desk, opened the fireproof box where we kept the deed and the truck title, closed it, opened it again an hour later. I came around the corner once and found her going through a folder of old tax returns the way you dig through a coat pocket for a lost 20. "Looking for something, Lorraine?" I asked. She didn't flinch. "Just memories, honey." And her heels clicked across the pine floor toward the next room, and I would come to know that sound, sharp, even metronomic, as the sound of Lorraine measuring a room for whether it could be hers. What I didn't know yet was what she was doing when she wasn't at my house. She was on the phone. Ellie's aunt, the neighbors, the men from Ellie's Tuesday night card game. She told them I changed the locks on the home place and wouldn't let his own mother in. She told them I'd lawyered up and was acting paranoid. None of it was true. I hadn't touched a lock, but Lorraine understood something I was too gutted to see in time. Whoever writes the story first gets believed. And she had started writing hers before the dogwoods finished blooming. 5 weeks after the funeral, Wade called. "We needed to sit down as a family," he said. "Just paperwork, nothing to stress about." I drove to Lorraine's. The three of them were arranged around her dining table, Lorraine, Sloane, Wade, like a hiring panel waiting on a candidate they'd already decided against. There was a sweating pitcher of tea nobody offered to pour. Wade slid a document across the table to me, turned so I could read it. "We wanted you to see this," he said gently. "Before anything's official, so there's no surprises." It was a will, typed, 2 pages, signed and dated 13 months before Ellie died. Self-proving, with a notary block at the bottom and a round, embossed seal. It left the home place, the land, the house, the workshop, to Lorraine. It left Ellie's life insurance, a $250,000 policy, split between Sloan and Wade. It named Wade executor. And to me, it left, and I am quoting the document, my personal effects and any items of sentimental value. 7 years of marriage, reduced to whatever fit in a cardboard box. Lorraine folded her hands. Ellie always said the home place should stay in the family. Marin, bloodland stays with blood. He told me that more than once. I read it again. I want to tell you I gasped, or shook, or stood up. I didn't. Something in me went very cold and very still and very awake. The exact feeling I have when I sit down at the comparison scope and lay the questioned signature beside the genuine one, and already, before I've adjusted the focus, I know. Because I'd looked at the signature. I have looked at Ellie Calder's signature 10,000 times. On invoices, on the back of checks, on the building permits he pulled for our workshop, on the inside cover of every paperback he ever finished and dated like a logbook. Ellie signed his name the way he did everything, fast, confident, the E built on a single downstroke with a little upward flick where his hand was already moving to the next letter. His signatures had life in them. Speed, a pulse. The name on that page was dead on the paper. The pressure was even all the way through, too even, the unmistakable plodding evenness of a hand that is drawing, not writing. The slant was off, tilted maybe 10 degrees from his habit. And the E, Ellie's E, always opened with that flick. This E had been built the careful way, stroke laid down on top of stroke, the loop reversed. Anyone else at that table saw their brother's name. I saw a tracing. I saw the graphite ghost I knew would be hiding under that ink if I put it under the right light. I kept my face the way I keep it on the witness stand. Flat, unreadable, curious. "Can I have a copy?" I asked. Wade smiled, relieved, mistaking my calm for surrender. "Course, we already filed the original with the clerk, made it easy." He handed me a copy. Filed. They'd filed a forged will with the clerk of Superior Court before they'd even told me it existed. I folded the copy in half, said something polite about needing to get home before dark, and walked to my truck. My hands were perfectly steady on the wheel, not from peace, from the specific, surgical fury of a professional who has just been handed, by amateurs, the exact crime she has spent 14 years proving in court. They had no idea who they'd just shown it to. That night, I spread the copy flat on my kitchen table under the good lamp, the one I'd brought home from the lab years ago, and I got out a legal pad, and I did what I do for paying clients. I made my list. 1, the line quality. Genuine signatures accelerate. The pen lifts and lands in predictable, fluid places. This signature had blunt starts and blunt stops, little pools of ink where a pen had paused, pause marks. We call them the fingerprints of a hand stopping to check its work against a model. You do not pause inside your own name. You've written it 500,000 times. You no longer think about it. Pausing is what a forger does. 2, the pressure. I couldn't run the instruments on a photocopy, but even on the copy the strokes were uniform. No thick-thin modulation, no natural shading on the downstrokes. A real hand presses harder coming down and lighter going up. It's involuntary, it's physics. It's gravity telling on you exactly like Ellie used to say. This name had been laid down at one careful, constant weight. The weight of a person concentrating. 3, the letter forms. The reversed loop on the E. the Y with a tail that curled the wrong way. Habitual stroke direction is one of the most stable things about a person's hand. It's older than their opinions, older than their face. You can copy the shape of a letter. You almost never reproduce the direction someone's hand naturally travels, and you certainly don't reverse it on purpose because you don't know it's there to reverse. And 4, the date. 13 months before he died, which meant the will claimed to have been signed during a stretch I could check, because he logged every job in a spiral notebook in the shop. And because we'd been, that month, in the middle of redoing our own bedroom, and I had 30 photos with timestamps, 4 red flags. In my office, any one of them flags a document for a closer look. 4 together isn't a question. 4 together is a neon sign in the dark spelling out a single word, forgery. I sat back. The house ticked and settled around me. And the thing that landed hardest wasn't the fury. It was the absurdity. They had committed the one crime on earth that I am specifically, professionally, court qualified to destroy. They had forged a document and handed it to a forensic document examiner and asked her to please accept it quietly so there wouldn't be any surprises. Oh, there were going to be surprises. If you've ever had someone look you in the eye and lie about a person you loved, and you had to keep your face still while every cell in your body lit up, you know the feeling I'm describing. If you do, comment make them look, because that became my whole strategy, and I'll show you exactly how it works. Now stay with me, because here's where I made the decision that changed everything. I decided to say nothing, not yet. Here is the thing most people get wrong when they're cheated. They react. They call, they accuse, they post, they confront. And all that does is warn the other side to clean up their evidence. I knew, the second I saw that page, that the smartest thing I could do was let them commit. Let them file it. Let them swear to it. Let them tell everyone in 3 counties that it was Ali's true and final wish. Because the deeper they buried themselves in that lie, the less ground they'd have to stand on when I pulled it out from under them. So when Wade texted, "Hope you understand it's just what Ali wanted," I wrote back, "I appreciate you all thinking of me. I need some time." Polite, soft, the text of a woman folding. And then I went to work on my own case, the way I've built 100 cases for other people. Except this time, the genuine signature I was protecting belonged to my husband. And I knew his hand better than I have ever known anyone's hand in my life. First, exemplars. To prove a signature is forged, you need known genuine ones to compare it against. And not 3, but a range, signed across years and moods and surfaces, so the natural variation of a real hand is on the record. I had a treasure that most of my clients can only dream of. I had Ali's whole life in his own hand. I pulled his signature off the deed, the mortgage, the truck title, the building permits, 11 years of business invoices, the back of 700 canceled checks, the flyleaf of 40 paperbacks. I photographed each one at high resolution with a scale bar, the way I document them for any case, and I built an exemplar file thicker than the Bible. Second, I did the thing professionals do that amateurs forget. I hired my own opposition. I couldn't be the testifying expert in my own case. A party can't be her own neutral expert. Any first-year lawyer would get me thrown out for bias, and they'd be right to. So I called a man named Dr. Howard Aiken, a fellow board-certified examiner over in Charlotte, a man who has testified more times than I have, and who has, twice, testified against my findings and been wrong, and told me so afterward over coffee, like a gentleman. I sent him the questioned document and a sealed set of exemplars, and I told him only the facts. Don't do me any favors, Howard. Tell me what the paper says. If Howard independently reached my conclusion, knowing nothing of my grief, no jury and no judge on earth could call it a widow's wishful thinking. Third, I retained a lawyer, Priya Nadar, a probate litigator in Asheville, sharp and unsentimental. And on a Tuesday at lunch, I filed a caveat. In North Carolina, you don't contest a will exactly. You file a caveat, a formal challenge that throws the whole thing open to be proven. Grounds: forgery and fraud. Filing fee paid on my own card. I did most of the drafting myself and let Priya make it bulletproof, and she looked up from the draft once and said, "You realize most clients can't tell me what ESDA stands for." "I run it 3 times a week," I said. She put her pen down. "Then let's go get them." The case file grew. It rode on the passenger seat of my truck every morning like a second person. It went into the lab, came home at night, sat on the kitchen table while I ate dinner alone. Microwaved soup, crackers, sometimes just coffee at midnight under that lamp. The house was the quietest it had ever been, but quiet isn't empty. Quiet was where I was building. Then I did the thing that turned a strong case into an unanswerable one. I went back for the pad. When Lorraine had been helping sort, I'd watched her carry things between the house and her car, and I'd watched Wade come and go from the workshop with the proprietary ease of a man already counting it as his. And I remembered something. On Lorraine's dining table, the day they showed me the will, there'd been a yellow legal pad pushed to the side, a few sheets torn off the top. I notice paper the way Illy noticed wood grain. I can't help it. I didn't break in anywhere, I want to be clear, because the law was the whole point. Priya served a discovery request, and among the boxes of estate documents Wade's side produced, trying to look cooperative, trying to look like they had nothing to hide, was a yellow legal pad. Their lawyer didn't think twice about it. To him, it was scrap. To me, it was a confession. I took it to the lab and ran it on the ESDA, the electrostatic detection apparatus. I won't bore you, but here's what it does. When you write on the top sheet of a pad, you press invisible grooves into the sheets below. ESDA charges the page and dusts it with toner that settles into those grooves, and the indentations rise up out of nowhere like a photograph developing. The page beneath the page tells you what was written above it, even after the top sheet is long gone. I laid the first recovered sheet on the lightbox, and my breath stopped. Pressed into that page, over and over, like lines a child writes on a chalkboard, was the signature. Illy Calder, Illy Calder, Illy Calder. A dozen attempts, each one a little smoother than the last, a hand practicing a dead man's name until it flowed. Practice. Tracing. The whole hidden labor of the forgery, captured in the grooves. And then, in the corner of that same sheet, pressed in a different, heavier hand, a hand I'd compare and confirm later as Wade's, 3 lines that made my ears ring in the silence of the lab. Ridgeline, Colry, 8 acres. Notary, Tuesday, Doug. Split 60/40 after Mom signs over. Ridgeline, a development company. 8 acres, our 8 acres, the home place, the poplar Illy's grandfather wouldn't cut. Doug, a notary, a Tuesday, and the last line. 60/40 after Mom signs over. The whole machine laid bare in graphite ghost. Wade had forged Illy's will to put the land in Lorraine's name, planning to talk his grieving mother into deeding it to him, planning to sell our home place to a developer, planning to split the money 60-40 with someone. The notary, I didn't know yet. He wasn't just stealing from me. He was setting up to steal from his own mother and using her dead son's name to do it. I sat in my lab for a long time with that page glowing on the table. I had run ESDA on hundreds of documents for strangers. I had never once recovered a thing that made me grieve and burn at the same moment. Ellie's name, traced into a page by the brother who promised at the graveside to take care of me. I photographed it. I logged it. I gave it to Howard, blind, with no commentary. He called me the next afternoon, and his voice was careful. "Marin, you sitting down? Tell me what the paper says, Howard." "The paper," he said, "says somebody practiced this signature into existence." The next kill shot, they handed me themselves, the way arrogant people always do. The will was notarized. A notary's whole job is to swear that a specific person appeared before them on a specific date and signed. The seal on the will read with a notary's name, D. Prout, and a commission number. And below it the magic words, "My commission expires," and a date. Notary commissions in North Carolina run for a fixed term and are public record. So I did the most boring, most devastating thing in my whole toolkit. I went to the Secretary of State's website and I looked up D. Prout's commission. Douglas Prout, Doug, from the legal pad, had been commissioned as a notary public 11 months before Ellie died. The will was dated 13 months before Ellie died. The notary had certified under his own seal that he watched Ellie Calder sign that document on a day when Douglas Prout was not yet a notary at all. He could not have notarized anything on that date. He didn't have the authority. He didn't have the seal. The seal on the document was for a commission that did not exist when the document claimed to be born. You don't need a microscope for that one. You don't need a degree. You need a calendar and the nerve to check. They had backdated the will to make it look like Ellie signed it while he was healthy and unsuspecting. And in backdating it, they dated it before their own notary was real. The lie tripped over its own feet. I almost laughed, alone in my kitchen. Ellie would have laughed. Gravity always tells on you, Mar. And then, the technical kill shot, the one I built precisely, because I knew their lawyer would try to wave away the handwriting as just opinion. Two examiners can disagree about a slant. Nobody argues with chemistry. I sent the original, once Priya pried it loose from the clerk's file for examination under court order for ink analysis. Not just any look. I had the lines sampled and run. And I examined the document under the video spectral comparator across the infrared and ultraviolet bands. The signature ink fluoresced. And the formulation, the specific dye package in that blue gel ink, corresponded to a product line the manufacturer did not bring to market until after the date written on the will. Let me say that plainly, the way I'd say it to a jury. The ink that signed that will did not exist yet on the day the will says it was signed. A man cannot sign a document with a pen that won't be manufactured for another year. It is not a matter of opinion or slant or pressure. It is a matter of chemistry and a calendar. And chemistry does not get rattled on cross-examination. So now I had 4 independent proofs, any one of which would have been enough, stacked into a thing no lawyer could climb over. 1. The handwriting itself, traced, paused, reversed, dead on the page. Confirmed by an independent board-certified examiner who'd never met Ellie. 2. The ESDA pad, the practice signatures, and the plan in Wade's own hand. 3. The notary commissioned 11 months before, certifying a signing 13 months before, an impossibility on the face of the seal. 4. The ink, chemically impossible for the date. I closed the document case. It was getting heavy. It was almost full. There was one tab left to fill, and to fill it, I had to do the hardest thing in the whole 6 months. I had to go find out what Ellie had actually left me, because somewhere under all their lies was the truth, and I had a terrible, hopeful feeling I knew where it was. Ellie was married to a forensic document examiner. He used to bring me things to officially authenticate as a joke, a birthday card to confirm it's really from me, a grocery list for the record. It was our bit. But 6 months into our marriage, he'd done something that, at the time, I'd laughed at and filed away. He'd come home one evening and said he'd been to the courthouse and lodged his will with the clerk of Superior Court for safekeeping. You can do that in North Carolina. Hand the clerk your original will in a sealed envelope, and they keep it in the vault, and there's a record. Why on earth, I'd asked him, would you do that when we have a perfectly good fireproof box? And he'd grinned that grin and said, because I married the one woman in the state who'd know if anybody ever faked my name. Figured I'd make it easy on you, save you the trouble. I had laughed. I had honestly forgotten it. Grief eats the small things first. I went to the clerk's office on a gray Wednesday with my ID and my marriage certificate and Ellie's death certificate. And a deputy clerk brought me a sealed envelope from the vault with Ellie's handwriting across the front, my hand, the real one, the E with the flick. Alive on the paper, after all those months of looking at the dead copy, I authenticated it on site, the way you'd know your own child's voice, in a crowded room, inside Ellie's true will, properly executed, self-proving, witnessed by 2 men I knew and trusted, his oldest friend Marcus and our neighbor Dell, and notarized by a notary whose commission, I checked later out of pure habit, was real and current. It left everything to me, the home place, the workshop, Calder and Son, all of it to my wife, Marin, who already knows what to do with it. And it predated their forgery by years, and it was already in the custody of the very court they'd filed their lie with. They had filed a forged will in the same building where Ellie's real one had been sleeping in a vault the whole time, and folded behind the will was a single sheet of his graph paper, the kind he sketched stairs on, and on it, in pencil, in that unmistakable hand. Mar, if you're reading this here and not at home, then something happened, and I'm sorry I'm not there to watch you do what you do. You can always tell the real thing from a fake. So can a judge if you make them look. So make them look. Plumb, level, and true. I sat in my truck in the courthouse lot, and I cried for the first time since the funeral. Not the leaking that had happened at red lights for months. The real kind, the kind that bends you over the steering wheel, because Ellie had known. Not that he'd die, he couldn't have known that, but he'd known them. He'd known his own family well enough, years ago, to quietly stack the deck in my favor and never tell me, so I'd never have to carry the weight of expecting the worst from people I was supposed to love. He hadn't just left me a house. He'd left me the exemplar. He'd left me the instructions. Make them look. I was going to make them look. The isolation got worse before it got better, the way these things do. Ellie's aunt called with a voice full of borrowed concern. Honey, is it true you locked Lorraine out and you're selling the workshop? I hadn't locked anyone out, and I'd sooner sell my hands than that workshop. Marcus, Ellie's oldest friend, the one who'd witnessed the real will, got a visit from Wade telling him I'd gone strange with grief. Marcus called me that night and said, Marin, I signed Ellie's actual will 4 years ago. I know what's real. Whatever you need, I'm there. It was the first time in months someone had handed me ground to stand on instead of taking it away. Then came the offers, which is how I knew they were scared. A forged document only works as long as nobody examines it. Wade's lawyer sent a settlement letter. I could keep my personal effects and walk away with $20,000 and no hard feelings. $20,000. Against a home place a developer had offered $600 for, and a life insurance policy worth $250. They were offering me the change in the cushions to please stop looking. I declined in one sentence, copied to the court file. Kvatrix declines and intends to proceed. That night Sloane called, and she'd been drinking. I could hear it. "You're going to humiliate yourself," she said. "You're going to stand up there alone with your little magnifying glass, and everyone's going to see what you are." "And what's that, Sloane?" I asked, genuinely curious. There was a pause, and then she said the thing I still hear sometimes when the house gets too quiet and my mind walks back into that year. "You married a Calder, Marin. You never were one. Blood keeps the home place. You were just company." She said it the way people say things they've been saving up, polished from handling. Practiced. Aimed at the ribs. I looked out my kitchen window at the dark shape of the workshop, where my husband had built true things with his hands, on land his grandfather saved from the saw, that Ellie had left to me in his own living signature, locked in a courthouse vault. "Good night, Sloane," I said, and I hung up, and I did not feel like company. If you've made it this far, you already know how I feel about people who count you out before you've said a word. If a moment in this story has reminded you of someone who underestimated you, comment real over fake. Because that's exactly what a courtroom is for, sorting the real from the fake. And then stay with me, because the morning I've been telling you about is finally here. I spent the last 3 weeks the way I imagine a surgeon prepares, obsessively. I wrote my caveat presentation and rewrote it. I prepped Howard, though he needed none. I scheduled Marcus and Dell. I had Priya drill me on every question their lawyer might throw, and then I drilled her on the science until she could pronounce electrostatic detection apparatus in her sleep. I practiced in front of the bathroom mirror, then the empty couch, then over the phone with Howard, who'd stop me and say, "Slower on the ink. Let them sit in it. The judge needs a beat to understand that chemistry can't lie." I bought a navy suit. First new thing I'd bought since Ellie died. Standing in the fitting room under the bad light, I realized that for 6 months, every single thing I'd done had been a reaction to Lorraine's search, to Wade's maneuvers, to Sloane's calls. The suit was the first thing I'd chosen for the woman I intended to be when I walked through that courtroom door, instead of the widow they'd cast me as. The night before, the calls came right on schedule. Sloane at 9, a text this time, "Last chance to not embarrass yourself," with a laughing face. Lorraine at 9:40, her voice in that soft register she used when she wanted something. "Marin, it's not too late. I don't want to see you hurt in front of a judge." "I appreciate the call, Lorraine," I said. "I'll see you tomorrow." I hung up and I sat on the edge of the bed I still slept on only one side of, and I opened the document case one last time and looked at every tab in order. And then I closed it and set it by the door. And for the first time in months, I slept the whole night through. No 3 a.m. heart pounding. Just the deep, clean sleep of a person who knows exactly what she's going to do and exactly how she's going to do it. The Buncombe County courtroom was smaller than people imagine from television. No jury box in use that morning. A caveat can be tried to the bench, and Judge Alina Pratt had a way of looking over her glasses that told you she had heard every flavor of human greed and had run clean out of patience for the performance of it. Lorraine, Sloane, Wade, the lawyer in the good suit, call him Mr. Doyle, and me, alone at my table with Priya beside me, the document case open, the tabs squared. Doyle stood first. His opening was smooth as a banister. Your Honor, Illy Calder executed a valid will 13 months before his death, signed, witnessed, and notarized. His widow, in her grief, has talked herself into a conspiracy. We ask the court to admit the will as written and let this family begin to heal. Grief, conspiracy, healing. He gestured at me with an open hand, kindly, the way you gesture at someone you've decided is to be pitied. Then I stood. Your Honor, I said, with the court's permission, I'd like to address the document itself. I should disclose to the court who I am, because opposing counsel has characterized me as a grieving widow with a theory. I let that sit one beat. I am a board-certified forensic document examiner. I have been court qualified as an expert in questioned documents 61 times in state and federal court, including before this court 3 years ago in the matter the clerk will have on file. I authenticate signatures and detect forgeries for a living. I will not be testifying as the expert in my own case. Dr. Howard Aiken, an independent examiner, will do that, and his findings are his own. But I want the court to understand, before we begin, that the document the petitioners filed was handed for safekeeping to the one person in this room, professionally trained, to know whether my husband's name is real. The room changed temperature. Doyle's pen stopped. Wade shifted in his chair. And Lorraine looked at me for the first time all morning like she was recalculating something she'd been very sure of. I caught one small thing then. Lorraine had her wallet open in her lap, and inside it was a photograph Illy, maybe 9, gap-toothed, holding up a string of bluegill on the dock at the creek. Her thumb was on the edge of it. Her eyes were wet. Her grief was real. It had always been real. It just hadn't protected her from being used, and it didn't excuse what her name was now attached to. We started with the boring proof, because the boring proof was unanswerable. Exhibit 1, Your Honor. The commission record of the notary on the filed will, Douglas Prout, certified copy from the Secretary of State. Mr. Prout's commission was issued 11 months before Mr. Calder's death. I handed up the second page. The will is dated 13 months before Mr. Calder's death. The notary certified, under seal, that he witnessed a signing on a date when he was not a notary. 2 months before he held the commission, whose number appears on the seal. Judge Pratt looked at one page, then the other, then over her glasses at Doyle. Counsel. Doyle said he'd need to confirm the dates. They're confirmed, the judge said dryly, and made a note. Then the chemistry, Dr. Aiken took the stand, stated his 60-some testimonies, and laid it out with the warmth of a man reading a phone book, which is exactly what you want. The traced signature, the pause marks, the reversed stroke direction on the E, shown at 400% on a screen beside a dozen genuine exemplars, where even the bailiff leaned forward to see the difference once it was pointed out. And then the ink. The dye formulation in the question's signature, Howard said, was not commercially available until after the date on the document. In my opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, this signature was applied with an ink that did not exist when the document claims to have been signed. Doyle rose to cross. Dr. Aiken, isn't it possible, Mr. Calder simply signed in a hurry? People's signatures vary. Haste changes speed and size, Howard said. It does not summon an ink from the future. A small sound moved through the gallery. Doyle tried again, temperature, paper, the angle of the desk. Counsel, Howard said, not unkindly, no writing surface on earth changes the chemistry of the ink in the pen. Doyle sat down, then the pad. I'd saved it, because some evidence you want the judge holding when the rest has already turned the room. Exhibit 6. A legal pad produced by the petitioners in discovery. Their own discovery, Doyle couldn't object to a document his side had handed over as authentic. I walked Judge Pratt through the ESDA recovery, the developing of the indentations, and then I put the enlargement on the screen. Illy Calder, Illy Calder, Illy Calder. A column of a dead man's name, practiced into smoothness. The courtroom was very quiet, and in the corner of the same sheet, Your Honor, pressed in a different hand, I put up the lines. Ridgeline, Colry, 8 acres. Notary, Tuesday, Doug. Split 60/40 after Mom signs over. I let the silence do its work. The home place is 8 acres. Ridgeline Development made an offer on it. The notary is the same Mr. Prout. And the last line describes a plan to have the property deeded out of the mother's name after she signed a plan, Your Honor, to defraud not only the widow, but the very mother in whose name this forged will places the land. I turned, not to the judge, but I felt it happen behind me. I heard Lorraine make a sound. A small, awful, breaking sound. Judge Pratt set down her glasses. Mr. Doyle, does your client wish to be heard? Wade started to stand, but it was Lorraine who rose, slow, both hands flat on the table. She wasn't looking at the judge. She was looking at Wade. 60/40, she said, quiet. After Mom signs over. She turned the words around in her mouth like she was tasting something gone bad. You told me, she said to her son, that Illy wanted me to have the home place. You told me you found the will in his shop. You sat in my kitchen, and you told me my boy's last wish was for his mother to be taken care of. Her voice climbed and cracked all at once, like a windshield taking a stone. You used him. You used me. You made me carry that lie into this room. Wade said, don't. Lorraine turned to the bench. Her chin was up, but it was trembling. Your Honor, I don't understand the science. I'm an old woman and I lost my son, but I know my children's handwriting. She looked at the screen, at the heavy hand in the corner. That's Wade's printing. That's my Wade's printing. I'd know it anywhere. I have 40 years of grocery lists in it. She sat back down like the strings had been cut, and she put her face in her hands, and Sloane, in the gallery, stood up, took one step toward the aisle, and chose the door. I heard it close behind her. I did not feel triumphant. I want to tell you I did, but I didn't. I felt the strange, flat sorrow of being right about the worst thing. Judge Pratt reviewed her notes for a long while. The court reporter's machine had gone still because no one was speaking. Then she put her glasses back on. The court finds, by clear and convincing evidence, that the document offered by the petitioners and dated 13 months prior to the decedent's death is a forgery. The signature is not genuine. The notarization is, on its face, impossible. The court is satisfied as to fraud. One finding. That was all it took. The court further recognizes the valid will of Illy Calder, executed and lodged for safekeeping with the clerk of this court, properly witnessed and self-proven, under which the decedent's entire estate passes to his surviving spouse, Marin Calder. She paused and looked over her glasses, this time not at me. Additionally, the court refers this matter to the district attorney for the investigation of forgery, uttering a forged instrument and notarial fraud, and directs that the notary's commission be reported to the Secretary of State. Wade sat down very slowly, the way a wall settles when something behind it finally lets go. Doyle gathered his files, and on his way past my table he paused and gave me one small, tight nod. The nod of a man who underestimated someone and knows it, and knows that she knows. I picked up the document case. It was lighter than it had been in 6 months, because everything inside it was now on the record where it belonged. Marcus was waiting in the marble hallway, and he stood up off the bench when he saw me and shoved his hands in his pockets and said, "He'd have been so proud of you." "He'd have been annoyed I didn't bring him to watch," I said, and Marcus laughed, and I laughed, and it felt like using a muscle that had been splinted for a year. In the weeks that followed, things fell where gravity took them, the way Ellie always said they would. The DA opened a file. The notary surrendered his commission. The land deal with Ridgeline died on the vine. Wade got his own lawyer, separate from his mother now, because their interests had split the moment the word criminal entered the room. Sloane stopped calling. I heard, through Marcus, that she'd moved and wasn't speaking to anyone. And whether that was shame or strategy, I didn't ask, because I no longer had to care. Lorraine wrote me a letter. Real handwriting, the kind I'd have known anywhere. It was 4 lines long. She said she was sorry. She said she'd believed a lie because it was wrapped in her son's name, and she'd wanted so badly for one more thing of his to be true. She did not ask for the house. I read it twice, and I put it in a drawer, and some doors, I've learned, you don't slam and you don't reopen, you just let them rest, quietly closed, and you find one day you don't have the energy or the wish to walk back through. I drove out to the home place that afternoon and parked in the gravel and sat on the leaning porch with Ellie's grandfather's brass-edged level across my knees. The poplar stand was leafing out down by the creek, the trees his granddad wouldn't cut, the trees nobody was going to cut now. The workshop door still said Calder and Son. There still wasn't a son. There was just me, and I intend to finish the sentence. I want to tell you the thing I understand now that I didn't a year ago. You can copy a man's name. You can practice it into a page until it flows. You can trace it, notarize it, file it with a court, and tell 3 counties it's the truth. But a forged signature always trembles where the real one flows. It pauses where the real one runs. It presses where the real one breathes. The lie is in the hand, and the hand can't help it, and gravity always tells on you in the end. They thought my grief made me weak. They thought a widow alone was a widow beaten. They forgot, or they never knew, that I have spent my whole life learning to see the exact place where a lie meets the paper and gives itself away. And the cruelest thing they ever said to me turned out to be the truest. I married a Calder. I never was one. They meant it as a wall. But he left me everything in his own living hand, and a judge agreed. And so I'll tell you what I learned about blood and about being just company. Blood didn't keep the home place. The truth did. And the truth, it turns out, doesn't need to shout. It just refuses, quietly and forever, to match the lie. That's my story. 6 months of silence, 1 forged signature, 4 proofs, and a judge who only needed 1 finding. Plumb, level, and true. If this reminded you that being underestimated is its own kind of weapon, that the quiet, prepared ones are the ones you should never bet against, do me a favor and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you've ever had to walk into a room full of people who counted you out and walk out having made them look, I would truly love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.